And I understood that really the roots of why I'm having these chronic symptoms are more of old emotional and belief patterns and my brain being on high alert with a stressed out nervous system. So once I recognized that, I kind of went into very much more like brain training type stuff, like really just trying to soothe my brain, soothe my nervous system so that I wasn't on high alert all the time. Then the next layer of that was much more a deep emotional healing, which I really think is a lifelong process. I'm still in it. But really understanding that some of the trauma in my past, some of the emotional neglect that I've experienced has been wrapped up in my body. A lot of repressed emotions is now bubbling over in this overflowing reservoir to where my brain and my nervous system were like, we can't handle that anymore. So we're going to send you all these physical symptoms because that is the best way to get your attention.
Mm. Welcome to Hopeful and Wholesome, the show where ambitious women come home to their bodies. I'm your host, Hope Pedraza, and I'm a functional practitioner, human design guide, and expert on all things energy, and your partner in decoding the language of your body. This is your space to reconnect with your body's wisdom, reclaim your energy, and rise into alignment in your health, your business, and your life. Because thriving isn't about pushing harder, it's about learning to listen deeper. So let's dive in because your next breakthrough starts right now. Hey y'all, welcome back to Hopeful and Wholesome. Today I have on the show Grace Secker, and she is a licensed therapist, certified yoga therapist, and a nervous system coach. She is the founder of Heal with Grace, a private practice dedicated to integrative therapy and coaching. She created the Mind-Body Healing Method, a group healing program designed to help people break free from chronic pain and sensitivity disorders. She's also the host of the Heal with Grace podcast, which I had the honor of being a guest on, where she explores the deep connection between the mind and the body in healing. With a passion for empowering others, Grace helps people reclaim the life they love by addressing the root causes of mental and physical distress. And as a teacher of teachers, she shares her expertise on treating mind-body chronic symptoms, equipping professionals with the tools to help guide others on their healing journey. And today we are talking about our brain and the brain that our brain plays in healing chronic pain, chronic disease, chronic illness, and also how nervous system regulation plays a part in chronic disease and chronic symptoms. And of course, we've talked about the nervous system in so many different capacities on the show, but I love Grace's approach because she really does take this from a very trauma-informed lens. We're really going to dive deep into these patterns, these nervous system patterns that can play out and what is making us tired and sick and exhausted and leading to things like chronic disease. I love this conversation with Grace, so let's jump in.
Thank you, Hope. I'm excited to be here.
Me too. So I love a good pod swap. And so me and Grace have connected already because I was on her podcast and talked with some ladies in her group. And I'm so excited to have you bring your expertise to my audience here. And one thing that I love about what you do is you are like an actual therapist, like a licensed therapist, but you're using all of these somatic tools. And this is not to discount, coaches because I use a lot of the same tools, but you're like an actual therapist. And I think that, a lot of times there's this separation between the two. There's like the kind of talk therapy route. And then there's the part where we can, add kind of the somatic stuff and the nervous system stuff, which is what you do. So I would love for you to just share how the journey for you bringing that piece in rather than going the traditional talk therapy route as a licensed therapist.
Yeah, honestly, from very early on, without even consciously recognizing it, I've always very much so been pulled to any kind of body-based practices. For me, the entry into that was yoga. I was a very big yogi in my early 20s and always did a practice for myself, but everyone around me was like, are you ever going to do teacher training? Just like maybe kind of putting me into that. And I was like, I don't know. Once I did, I started training. I had a really amazing mentor who kind of guided me through all of that. I started blending it with talk therapy and then became certified in yoga therapy. And so that was kind of my first, I guess you could say, combining talk therapy with some sort of somatic body-based practice. Then enters in all of my personal physical illnesses, pain, things that I went through on a personal level from a body-centered place, which, to be honest, at that time, I still didn't really connect the dots of there's a mental component here because we don't learn that in school at all.
Yeah.
I never learned anything like this as a therapist around understanding the nervous system, understanding the mind body connection, because I did go to a very traditional therapy program, very traditionally talk therapy. Now, there are a lot of, well, actually, I shouldn't say a lot. There's a few somatic therapy programs, but it's not the norm for sure. So, yeah, it's kind of been this just like along the way, I've meshed different things together. I've always been a movement oriented person. I've always loved dance and things like that. So, it wasn't until recently until I really started to understand we really are whole one system. And so, after I started healing through my chronic pain and illness journey with many, many different types of symptoms, I mean, I'm that person that's like had a whack a mole of all kinds of like chronic illness symptoms. I started doing my own healing, and then a like light bulb moment went off, and I was like, "Oh, okay, I see it
Mm-hmm.
now. I have to do this professionally. I can't not." And so since then, I've just dived into all different types of so many different types of modalities that aren't just traditional therapy. That, if I'm being truly honest, I am much more attracted to those than any other traditional therapy trainings in this time in my career. It just makes more sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I very much so still operate off of my licensure, and I am a licensed therapist. And at the same time, I really value bringing in a lot of other kind of modalities because we're not cut off. We are not just our mind. We're not just mental health. We are mental, physical, spiritual, emotional. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. No, I love that connection. That's a big realization. What do you find in your own personal journey? Because you were talking about all your chronic illnesses and all the things, and you brought in a lot of these modalities to help yourself. For
mhm.
you, I'm just curious, what did you
Yep.
find were a lot of those kind of body-based root causes of what you were dealing with chronically?
First and foremost, I had to recognize that what I was dealing with on a physical level was not going to be treated from a physical treatment standpoint. I had to really kind of come to grips with that. And I learned that through pain reprocessing therapy, through a lot of work by the original book was Dr. John Sarno, who founded tension myositis syndrome. And I understood that really the roots of why I'm having these chronic symptoms are more of old emotional and belief patterns and my brain being on high alert with a stressed out nervous system. So once I recognized that, I kind of went into very much more like brain training type stuff, like really just trying to soothe my brain, soothe my nervous system so that I wasn't on high alert all the time. Then the next layer of that was much more a deep emotional healing, which I really think is a lifelong process. I'm still in it. But really understanding that some of the trauma in my past, some of the emotional neglect that I've experienced has been wrapped up in my body. A lot of repressed emotions is now bubbling over in this overflowing reservoir to where my brain and my nervous system were like, we can't handle that anymore. So we're going to send you all these physical symptoms because that is the best way to get your attention.
Mm,
And because physical illness and pain are much more accepted are in our society than mental or emotional,
that's so true.
or what am I trying to say? Mental or emotional distress.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That's such a big one, man. And you're so right. It is so much more accepted. Well, and I think that's a multifaceted thing, right? I mean, it's, I'd say, quote unquote, easier to address that than like getting to the root cause of the emotional stuff. 'Cause it's like, oh, let's give you a diagnosis and we got a pill for that. Or let's give you a
Yeah,
diagnosis and we can treat this and this. But when it's like the mental emotional stuff, it takes a lot more work and it's a lot more complex than the physical stuff.
it does. It takes a lot. I mean, I fully value support. We need support. We need mentors and coaches and therapists and teachers. And at the same time, it still comes down to you doing the work. And it
Mm-hmm.
would be so much easier if you could just take a pill or get a surgery or whatever. Right? That's why people are stuck in that for so long. I mean, I talk to
Yeah.
people all the time where they're thinking about working with me and they're kind of grasping that like this is a part of their journey, but still not really sure. And maybe they'll go away and they'll do some other treatment and then realize that doesn't work. And then they come back and they're like, okay, now I'm ready. It takes time. Like
Yeah.
it's hard to confront the things that actually are really underneath.
Yeah, for sure. You talked about retraining your brain. I would love
Mhm.
for you to kind of unpack that a little bit. And I mean, you could talk about what that looks like for you or for your clients, but just what does that retraining look like? And when it comes to kind of unmeshing the emotional stuff from the physical stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So, and in some ways, I say that it's not complicated because it's not necessarily complicated, doesn't always make it easy. So I will
Yeah,
say
yeah, yeah.
that.
Sure.
right? But in a way, it's actually very simplistic. When our alarm bells are going off in our nervous system, our brain, there's certain aspects of our brain, our primal brain, that are operating more than our conscious brain that actually makes us human. Like our frontal lobe is what makes us human. And a lot of times that takes a back seat when we are in high stress, when our nervous system is in a dysregulated state. So our amygdala is like, I like to imagine it as like, it's like this bright red, kind of on alert, to where we can use visualization techniques as well as literally talking to ourselves, talking to our brain is brain training to help soothe that part of the brain to recognize it doesn't need to drive the show. Our primal state of being doesn't need to drive our nervous system. So sometimes that's visualization techniques. Sometimes it looks like guided meditations with reminding your brain and your body that you're safe. And the big part of that is why I emphasized in the beginning the educational piece around actually what's happening. That's really important because if we don't grasp it, if we're not connecting the fact that our mind and our brain are sending a bunch of danger signals to our body, and that's the reason we're having symptoms instead of something going on physically in our body, then it doesn't fully connect. So we have to make that connection to recognize to our bodies to actually like release and to, oh, okay, we are okay. It takes a little bit of time because I get it. That's a whole 180 of, understanding your health. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, it does make sense. Yeah. And I agree. I mean, I think I tell this to my clients all the time. And I think I had a conversation last week on another gal's podcast about this. I think that's what you're saying. Like the understanding and the awareness piece is such a huge foundation for the rest of it, because I think there is that there's a big sense of empowerment when you actually understand what's going on in your body. And so I think that's like the first step is just like, how does my body work? How does my mind work? Like, what are my emotions? Like just feeling and understanding those pieces, that's a big foundation for all of that.
Yeah, exactly. So actually, for an example, some of my clients will come to me and they're like, okay, if I have emotional roots to this, I've been in therapy before, right? Nothing's changing. Like, I don't really, I've been doing this kind of therapy or that kind of therapy or working with my emotions. So why isn't anything changing? And really, that is the missing piece. It was really connecting the idea that first and foremost, your body is not in full on danger. You probably, even if you've been told by many practitioners who mean very well, that there's some issue in your body, that's not the root cause. And so once we connect that, then still continue to do it in a slightly different way, some emotional work, some brain training work, that's really that missing piece of truly understanding how the whole system is working.
Yeah. No, I agree. I love that. When we're so I'm just thinking of like specific instances here. We're talking about retraining. Examples. Like I know there's a lot of women that I work with, a lot that listen to the show that deal with things like perfectionism or even just, which I think obviously I think this is all related, but like there's this kind of underlying, as a high performer, a lot of high performing women listen to this show. So there's like this kind of underlying sense of anxiety or urgency. I actually have an episode next week coming out about urgency. And so there's kind of this, that's like what's running the software, right? It's this feeling of anxiety and urgency and got to do it and get it done. And blah, blah, blah. So when you've been in that for so long, like when that's been the programming that's been running for so long, can you talk about that because it's not, like you said a second ago, like it's simple, but it's not easy. Like it's a simple thing to like, oh, let's rewire, retrain, but this is not an easy thing. Otherwise everybody would be like living their best life without the anxiety and all the other things. So when this has been so hardwired in us, like how do we retrain that out of us?
Yeah. First and foremost, I'll say one of the reasons why it's so hard is because it's threatening to your sense of self and nervous system to not be that way. And what I mean by that is that when we have these tendencies like high urgency, anxiety, perfectionism, we're doing that because it feels like if we do that, then we are worthy, we are enough, we are doing the right things. And if we take those things away, then our unconscious thinks that, oh, we aren't good enough, we're not worthy, we need to be doing all these things to be okay, to be an okay person, to like think highly of ourselves. So that's the connection we need to break. That no matter what, you are worthy just as you are. And actually, one of my friends, Lindsay, who's created some content for me in my program, she talks about how on her chronic fatigue journey at the like worst of her times, literally in bed, could barely get to the bathroom, barely eat. That was her turning point for her, that she had to remind herself, I am worthy literally just by laying in this bed, just by being human, just in the soul that I am. And that's what we have to get to, because that might not be your story. You might not be that, in bed, but that's the programming, like you're saying, that's running the show essentially. And so not only is that happening, but also when we approach our healing from that place, from the sense of urgency and anxiety and perfectionism, it doesn't end up working. Actually, I just made a post about this yesterday because I talked to the women in my group about it. When we are working through some kind of visualization, or maybe we're working with emotions, or we're working through a meditation, and you're sitting there and you're like, I'm trying to be calm, trying to breathe, like I'm settling, I'm retraining my brain, and all you're doing is just trying to get through it.
Yes.
And you're trying to make whatever symptom go away. Our brains are smarter. They're like, no, it's not about getting over it. It's not about making something change, which I know is really hard to grasp because you're doing this to try to change. But it's the cliche of like, we have to go through the woods instead of around it. Like you have to go through and be in the process instead of moving through it really fast just to get to the outcome.
Yep.
It's called outcome independence.
Yep.
That's a big learning curve that happens over and over and over again. I talk about this all the time because it comes up all the time.
Hey, y'all, we'll get right back to the episode. But first, let me ask you this. You've built a vision that others admire, and you've built something that you're really proud of. But behind the scenes, your body feels like it's lagging behind. It just can't quite catch up to your brilliance and your mission that you have. That late night second wind, the foggy mornings, the hormone shifts, the endless push and forcing. You can't strategize your way out of that. And you already know you don't need more supplements. You don't need another supplement stack. You also don't need another side hustle disguised as self-care, because nobody wants to have their health as a side hustle. This is about recalibrating your entire ecosystem. And that's why I created the Quantum Reset, a premium 3-month high-touch healing experience for visionary women who are ready to feel as powerful in their bodies as they do in their business. Inside, we decode your nervous system, your minerals, your hormones. We read your labs like the sacred text that it is, so we have actual answers. And then we pair that with deep energetic recalibration, subconscious release. We use gene keys, we use human design, and true embodied healing. This isn't about fixing burnout, because that's not what we're doing here. This is about becoming the woman whose body is powerful, whose body is completely electric, whose energy, clarity, radiance finally matches the size of her mission. If you know your success isn't meant to cost you your vitality, and you're ready for a science-backed, spirit-led reset, then the Quantum Reset is your invitation. So check the link in the show notes or send me a message on Instagram, and let's bring your body back online with your brilliance. Now, let's get back to the show. No, it does. It's so funny you said that. I have an episode coming out. I do like little mini episodes every Friday, and my one tomorrow is about that. It's like you have to, I forget how I say it. Basically that, yeah, you have to go through it to like, you have to feel it to heal it kind of thing. That's not exactly what I say, but it's like I use the metaphor of like the buffalo. The buffalo goes straight into the storm. When the storm's coming, the cows run the other direction. The buffalo has to go head on because he knows he has to go through it to get to the other side to like do it. So I love this. And that is such a hard thing. And I think the other piece of that, one of the reasons it's a hard thing is because we are so afraid to feel our emotions, whether that's like on a conscious level or not. We're so afraid to feel our emotions. I was listening to this masterclass yesterday, and this gal, she was like bringing people up and like doing kind of hot seat coaching. And this gal came up and gave this whole long story. I mean, this gal had like a really rough life, and she was giving this whole story about all these things that had happened to her, and then all these like physical things, and she's in the hospital for this, and then this happened, this physical thing. And the gal leading the masterclass, eventually she was like, I have a message for you. Can I share the message? And she's like, you are going to break every bone in your body and hurt everything in your physical body. And like the universe is trying to ask you to feel your emotions. Because at the core of it was this heartbreak she had experienced. And that was such a vivid example of listening to that. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is how we are. The universe is like, hello, like I'm asking you to feel this thing and like be with your emotions. And they're like, no, we're like, no. I'm gonna be in the hospital 28 times. Like, so my point is the emotional stuff, that's why that's the hard part. And so I would love for you to speak on that because we're so good at, you talked about repressing earlier, like stuff that you had repressed, and we're so good at bypassing emotions. And I think too, I think sometimes we think we're feeling them because it's like, oh no, I experienced this thing and I experienced it, but now now I'm okay. But you didn't actually feel the emotions involved in the thing you experienced. You know what I mean? So yeah, I'd love for you to speak on that and that part of it.
Yes, definitely. So there's two key components here. One, yes, you're correct. We can go through something, and I was talking to someone else about this the other day too. She was like, I feel like I felt the grief of that, and I'm here today. I don't know what else to say about it or feel about it. I didn't totally just disassociate and ignore it. And that might be very true. The thing is, there's different layers. And at certain times,
Right.
especially after something that's happened, a difficult time in life, ending of a relationship, whatever it is, we only have the capacity to feel some of that because
Mm,
you're in the middle of that stress
right.
response of what's
Right.
happening. We are multi-layered. We have lots of levels to us. Our unconscious goes deep. And so those feelings, emotions, beliefs around whatever happened stay stuck in there, especially when there's some sort of like guilt or shame or expectation that wasn't met around it. And if we didn't feel like we were allowed to really it be okay to move through that with ourselves, or we didn't have a safe container with someone to do that with, that's also a shift. That's why at the very core, therapy, the whole point of it is to be witnessed in your experience and your emotions by someone safe, right? And a lot of times, I don't know, a lot of times we have not had that. Humans don't have that. They didn't have that space to just truly be in our emotional state in whatever was happening in a safe environment and be witnessed in that. Someone literally seeing you and saying, I've got you. It's okay to be here. It's okay to be you. It's okay to feel it. We're relational beings. We're supposed to be in connection and move through things together. So when you have gone through something and you felt really isolated in it, that in and of itself is kind of a trauma in it.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't feel safe to be that alone in it. So our emotions, one, they're very relational. And two, we don't always know that, well, actually, most of the time we don't know we're repressing or pushing down
It's true.
because, like, yes, you might feel it, but how do you feel about feeling it? Meaning,
Mm,
so in Buddhism, there's this technique teaching, I guess you could say, called the second arrow. The first arrow is the emotion. We all have emotions. It's a human experience. We can't control necessarily what comes up, right? And that is just the true, raw emotion we need to feel. If we can do that, it can move through. But more often than not, most of the time, we have a second arrow, and that's the judgment on the emotion. Are we feeling shameful about feeling it? Are we feeling guilty
hmm.
about feeling it? Are we criticizing ourselves for feeling it or being criticized or rejected by someone else for feeling something? That's what keeps it stuck or keeps it down so much, so far that we don't even feel it because we're afraid of being rejected in it.
That's huge. That's huge. I think that's where it gets so sticky because it's the how are you feeling about the feeling? Because then it's just compounded. And
Yes.
I talk about compounded emotions with my clients all the time. And I think we don't really understand. A lot of times we're not recognizing how that happens because, obviously it can happen when you have multiple experiences that make you feel certain things. But then it's like I talked to them about like the stories we attach to it. And that's really how the emotion gets stuck in there, right? It's like if we attach, because the emotional process, like physiologically only takes what's like 90 seconds, like the chemical process of feeling the
Yep.
emotion, right? And then after that, it's whatever stories or like you're talking about, like this feeling you have about the feeling. That's what keeps it stuck in
Mm-hmm.
there.
Yeah. Or there's plenty. I Oh, this is such an interesting example. There's a neighbor that I was talking to at one point. She's one of those ones that just talks at you a lot, right? You don't really have space to share much else, so I'm just listening. And she was describing that she had her granddaughter in town, and she was like, I think I helped her because she just kept crying all the time. And I kept saying, like, there's no space for crying in the real world. So she stopped. And no joke, Hope,
Boy,
I had to just
bite your
I
tongue.
was like, like, do I say something? Do I not? I don't know here. What's my role? But it just was such an example of like, oh, like I just felt for that girl
Sure.
because that happens all the time. And that is a real true example of how things get stuck. We get messages of, oh, it's not okay to feel. Okay, I'll
Yeah.
lock that up. I'm not going to do
Yep.
that.
Yep.
But we can't always control it. So when they do come up, then we have shame about feeling.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think that's the biggest emotion that compounds the other one is the shame. Like that is such a deep emotional wound for so many women. We've talked about this on the show multiple times, but I feel like you hit the nail on the head because I think that's the one that just, it compounds because we can attach shame to any emotion, to fear, to anger, to grief, to rage, we can attach it to anything.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I'm glad you brought those up because really, when we're talking about repressed emotions, we're not just talking about, oh, I was sad about this thing. We're
Right.
talking about the enragement that we have, the disappointment, the deep, deep grief that we never allow ourselves to feel, the things that we never want to say because it's not okay to say. Like, I hate this. I'm so angry at this person. I can't believe this happened. I'm so enraged, especially as women.
Yes.
We've not been allowed to feel those things.
Yes. I was just going to
So
say that. Yep.
those are the deeper emotions in our reservoir. Nicole Sachs talks about this in our reservoir of emotions that we really need to get to instead of just like, yeah, it's hard right now. I don't really like my job or whatever it is. It's really like the disappointment and
Yeah.
the rage that happens that most of us don't actually know are there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. Well, and I think a lot of times we try, because like you said, especially for women, I mean, heaven forbid you have emotions and be emotional beings, even though there's a bunch of babies who run the world, baby men who run the world. But I think that a lot of times we go the opposite direction and we go to like toxic positivity, right? That kind of side of things where it's like, no, everything's fine, and try to like, that's our I guess our trauma response to that.
Yeah, exactly. And or like, yeah, write out affirmations and like be in a higher state of being, which I don't discount. There's a time and a place, and I think is very useful. I talk about that all the time with my students of we do have to shift into these different states of being in our bodies. And we got to go to those places that you don't want to go to and feel those emotions. You need both.
Yep. No, 100%. I could talk about this forever with you. There's so much to unpack here. This is so good. So as we start to wrap up, are there any tips or strategies or things you want to leave the women listening with, and just getting started with this, whether it's kind of uncovering these things we're repressing, whether it's feeling the things, like whatever, last tidbits you have to offer the women listening?
Yeah. Self-compassion. So much compassion and flexibility for yourself when you're starting this. And no, there might be some things that you feel like you're getting a little bit worse before they get better. Meaning, when you start to go and understand or dig a little bit deeper into your emotional states, your body might send you more protections, which might come out as symptoms, panic attacks, depression, I don't know, whatever it is for you. And that's okay. And that's normal. I say that because that's just interesting. It's just come up lately. There's been multiple people that are like, this isn't working. Things are getting worse. And I'm like, actually, that does mean it's working.
Yeah.
At least right now, so just be aware of that. And if you're not really sure how to tap in to this, again, I've posted multiple things about this, but also I mentioned Nicole Sachs. She created a practice called Journal Speak, and she talks about like how to get to these states of being in a journaling practice. So it's accessible just to get started.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
That's a really cool practice. I love the journaling thing, has been really supportive for me. This is so good. This is such a good conversation. And I know you've given us so many tools to dive into and just so much goodness to contemplate on. I have one more question I want to ask you that I like to ask everybody. But before I ask you that, can you let everybody know where they can find out more about you and maybe working with you and all the things? And your Instagram is so good. You're teaching so much. So where they can learn all the things.
Yeah, my Instagram is Heal with Grace, which is the same as my podcast, Heal with Grace. I put a lot out on both of those. And then the way to work with me right now is through my mind-body healing method, which is my 3-month program for understanding your nervous system, rewiring your brain, and getting to these emotional states to truly move through chronic pain, illness, high functioning, anxiety, perfectionism, pretty much everything I'm sure that you talk about. So Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Of course, I'll have links to that and all the show notes, and you'll give Grace a follow. She teaches lots of great stuff on her page. So, the last question that I want to ask you is, what do you think is the most important thing you can do to live with purpose?
Tuning in, figuring out how to tune into what that is for you. Because we probably have a lot of ideas of what living in purpose means, but they might come more from the outside, what other people are doing. But I think that we really have to hone in and figure out what that is for ourselves. And sometimes that takes time. Sometimes that takes more of a spiritual practice, a meditative practice, whatever it is, to figure out your intuitive sense of that. And I say that because one, it can change. And two, um, there's just a lot of shoulds of what we should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
But it is in the highest and best interest of everyone if we operate from what is best for us and how that means we operate into our purpose.
Yeah. I love that answer. I think that's so true. I think the other piece of that, like you're talking about, we kind of look at from the outside. I think the how, like how we discover that too. Like that's different for everybody. Like the what and the how is different for everybody. So I love that answer. It's such a good answer. Thank you so much, Grace. Thanks for hanging out with us and sharing so much of your wisdom, and for sharing all the light that you have to offer. Thank you so much.
Thank you.